think this is a fundamental change.
Prolongation of the Constitution.
Hello and welcome to the 15th episode in our series, The Evolution of a Nation, a documentary series chronicling Uganda's key political, economic and social history. I'm Bat Kakoza. Now, in the previous episode, we focused on Lule's 68 days of presidency and his subsequent sacking by the powerful military commission. In this episode, we focus on Binaisa's 11 months presidency and his push to assert his powers that resulted into being kicked out by the military commission. We shall also see the return of Obote and the preparations for the controversial 1980 general elections. But first, it is worth noting that after Amin, Ugandans genuinely believed that a new chapter had begun. With the coming of the elections, enthusiasm gripped the young and the old, together with a feeling that the final victory of justice and good over injustice and evil was within their grasp. All, however, was to be spoiled and the people's hope trampled on by political manipulations. Thanks for joining us. Following the removal of Lule and his 68 days-long government from power, the National Consultative Council, then interim parliament as it was known, reconvened at State House in Entebbe to elect a new president. The NCC, which had initially comprised 30 members elected at the Moshi Conference, Tanzania, was later in 1979 expanded to 120 members. Professor Edward Rugumayo was its chairman.
So he said, gentlemen, we must have a president. So, can you propose names? Mwanga, Rugumayo. A third one, who proposed him? It was Kategaya. Binaisa.
Kategaya proposes
Binaisa. And others were seconding. So, Mwanga and me had to be withdrawn now. I asked Sempebo to now to be the chair. They debated for hours. We went to sleep even in one of the rooms. About 5 o'clock, they came and tell us, come back to the room. So we came, and our Sempebo announces that the new president is Godfrey Lukongo Binaisa. I resume my chair now. About at dawn, who arrives with Binaisa in a Land Rover? Museveni and Mukwambe Mpambara.
You know, Binaisa was very interesting because he was very active in the independence struggle. He was very, very active. And at the time when Uganda and Mengo was against the central government, Binaisa was against that idea. He was saying, you know, must keep Uganda together. And you know, he was the Attorney General at independence. And got involved in the, what they call pigeonhole constitution. But for us, we thought he was more than Mengo. He was above Mengo. He was looking at Uganda as such. But of course, again, we had done much research on him.
Godfrey Binaisa was subsequently sworn in as the fourth president of the Republic of Uganda on the 20th June 1979 at Parliament Building.
I, Godfrey Lukongo Binaisa, do solemnly swear that I will well and truly exercise the functions of the high office of President of the Republic of Uganda without fear of favor, affection, or ill will. So help me God.
In many circles, he had been called the accidental president given the way he ascended to power. Former Chief Justice Samuel Wako Wambuzi reluctantly presided over the swearing ceremony.
Not being reluctant, I'd refused to do it in the first place because I hadn't been told that there had been another president appointed. So that fact had to be established first before, because if I remember correctly, some 3 people came to my quarters in Mansions where we are staying, and said there was the next day I should prepare to swear in the president. So I said to these people, I beg your pardon, swear in the president. What has happened to the president?
Rule that time, yeah.
Yes, that was Rule. So these people just looked at me and said, don't you know? Oh, don't you listen to the news? So I said, what if I do? Am I going to gather information from the news? To be told what is happening from the news? So I think they didn't like that very much. I went back, and I got another delegation which tried to explain what had happened. And, well, I took some steps to confirm, for example, the telephone... first I insisted. I said I want to see both the new president and the old one. Mm. And they said...
They were both in the State House?
They were both in the State House. Mm-hmm. And they said, no, that was not possible because the other one had already left State House. So I said, okay, I'll see them separately. They said, no, that would not be possible because they gave all sorts of excuses. So I said, okay, then I'll speak to the outgoing president. They had then cut off the telephone conversation. There's no connection with State House. So they re-established the line to State House. And I was able to talk to Dule. And he told me, yes, but he did not want to spill blood and the rest of it. So let the changes go ahead, as they said. Now, I accepted that. But later on I said, hey, what if there was a gun being leveled at his head? How could I... But anyway, that was the best I could do in the circumstances. So ultimately I said, okay. So I went and saw in Binaisa.
His short-lived time as the leader of this country came at a time when Uganda was going through a very turbulent time. The capital city, Kampala, was awash with all kinds of artillery. Murders, lootings and robberies were the order of the day.
They even shot dead Dr. Balo of Malago. They killed so many people without my knowledge. I was resting in Entebbe State House, and they used to come to carry out all these outrageous acts of crime, of criminal behavior, without my knowledge.
Many people, especially in the central region, were not happy that he had replaced their favorite, Yusuf Lure, as president.
The whole of Kampala went into confusion. No work, over fufa, and all those. The whole day we met. We said, no, people have a right to demonstrate. They're angry because we have not explained them what happened. Binaisa had to be sworn in that afternoon. But Rule was still saying he was president.
Still at State House?
Still at State House.
So Rule was sworn at Parliament?
No.
Binaisa at Parliament? At Parliament, not at State House.
Yeah, no State House.
And Rule was still in State House?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was quite interesting. And imagine Vice Chancellor Kajub Senteza organized students to demonstrate at night. Imagine at night. They came, Nile Mansions, which is now Serena, demonstrated. They wanted to break the gate. These army men had to use this noise machine and the fireworks, and they ran away. So anyway, they started burning tires, and we said, no, let them continue because they have every right. So we went on radio, we explained. Later on, we had a meeting of the elders, we explained what happened, and there was peace.
Although Binaisa was the darling of the West, with the diplomats lavishing him with praise for his experience and wit, there was internal acrimony against his presidency. As such, Binaisa's reign at State House was only in books, for he never stopped clashing with trouble. He was powerless and seemed not to take serious Nyerere's central role in Uganda's politics.
We had installed him, he was the president, now he was going to meet Mwalimu Nyerere for the first time. I was with Binaisa. We went there. I don't know what had happened to Binaisa. Either he had been drinking the night before or whatever it was. Now, Mwalimu would be talking and Binaisa would doze. And I remember, I wasn't seated far away because I was there. I remember that Mwalimu would just say, yes, as if to say, wake up, can we talk? When we came back, I sat with Binaisa, I said, please, that was not a performance. It was a disaster. You are meeting this man for the first time, and you are seemingly dozing. This is giving an opportunity to anybody else he could support. You are not material to be supported because you don't seem to be with the situation.
And indeed, Binaisa's administrative approaches were out of touch with the prevailing situation then. He spent the rest of the months of his reign trying to prove he was president. The fruitless struggle that gradually created fertile ground for his exit.
One day, Binaisa goes and puts on his army uniform as a president. Turns up in Rubiri to address troops. We were there for a few hours. The joke chased them. We chased him away.
The president of Uganda, according to that constitution, and I think according to the new constitution, he is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So he disobeyed lawful orders.
Binaisa's removal was occasioned by his quest to show might by transferring Defense Minister Yoweri Museveni from defense and appointing him Minister of Regional Cooperation, and also removing powerful Major General David Oito Jok from the army as Chief of Staff and appointing him Ambassador to Algeria.
You know, maybe when people become president, they have something happen. Because I can tell you, and you should also ask, I think, Mtevero, who was his PPS, actually Eddie almost. Binaisa has this idea that he wants to remove Oito Jok. Let Oito Jok. He said, why? Oh, you know, the UPC faction is strong, or what is using them, blah, blah, blah. But I said, how? How are you going to move Oito Jok? I remember. And then he had written a letter posting him as the ambassador to Algeria. And I was in touch with Tumsimi, the governor now. And we said, I told him, you hide the letter until we are really going to convince him that he should not do that. Because from my assessment, I could see that he's going to cause problems. Yeah. So he hid the letter and we tried to talk to him, said, look, no, I'm a president. But the reality.
Coupled with this move was his subtle plan to block Obote's return and ban political party activities with his proposed umbrella politics to have the 1980 elections held under UNLF. The plans, which Obote's clique quickly moved to frustrate.
You remember the late Oito Jok? He was one of the main people who tore the umbrella to pieces, and I used to spend to waste a lot of midnight oil trying to repair it. You remember that? When Oito Jok became so adamant, I transferred him to be an ambassador to Algeria, and his reply was to remove me from office.
1980, April. We held a meeting for 1 week debating the future of the movement, of the front. How are we going to manage this front? We debated and agreed that elections should be under the umbrella of Uganda National Liberation Front. Why? Because if we bring political parties now in this confusion, there will never be peace. All political parties must be there, but under the umbrella of Uganda National Liberation Front.
And the umbrella would be led by him?
By him, yes. He was an umbrella man. There was voting on this motion of umbrella. Some people voted, of course, the majority voted for umbrella. UPC and DP, some of them voted against the umbrella. Now, immediately after that debate, UPC and DP is Semogerere, UPC was David Anyoti, they go and denounce the results of the vote. They say, for us, we shall go to elections under parties.
Yeah.
Outside, let Muanga and Mr. Semogerere had a conference, a media press conference, and dissociated themselves from the resolution of the Consultative Council. And said for them, they are going back to their parties. So, those who were left, to support the resolution of the council were less than the combined UPC-DP group. So the question was, what do we do? For us, we felt, and I felt so, that it was not yet time. The political environment and atmosphere was such that it could not allow political parties. It was important that we continued with the togetherness in redeeming the politics of the country and the economy of the country.
Now, what happens? The situation became very volatile. Yeah. Binaisa decides to reshuffle the army. So we said, it's very dangerous. I said, no, I'll manage it. But then stories started coming that the military commission was planning a coup. Now, we had to do something as the NCC. Amwanya and I, we said, we must go and see Mwalimu Nyerere and tell him that a coup is in the offing. Could he stop it? So, we decided to go to Arusha. Mwalimu Nyerere was returning from Nairobi to meet the Pope. And Binaisa was also returning from Nairobi from meeting the Pope. He found us at the airport, going to Arusha. Yes, Arusha. We returned with him. We told him, sir, we are going to do this. But this issue of Oito joke, it's not right. He said, no, I'll manage it. You hear that? So now we go by air. We see the president the next day. So we tell him what had come for. Mr. President, can you please intervene because the coup is brewing? He said, no. My army cannot fight their comrades in arms. So what is happening? Just as we're there talking with him, he switches on BBC, Focus on Africa. Binaisa has been removed. NCC has been suspended. It was Muanga. So can you imagine? So now, the president says, gentlemen, we see each other again. So we move now, we go back to our hotel. And I don't want to go into details. Yes, we never went back to Uganda.
Following the removal of Binaisa from power on 10th May 1980, after 11 months as president, a 6-man military commission headed by Paul Muanga as chairman effectively took charge of the country. It had been formed during the Moshi Conference. The commission's vice chairperson was Yoweri Museveni. Other members were Brigadier Zed Maluru, General Tito Okello, Brigadier Oito Joke, and Brigadier Sam Nanyumba.
The military commission actually took over. It carried out a coup. This time it wasn't the NCC talking of what. It was the military commission. Now, the issue was the people who are armed, the armed groups. The situation is getting confused. We must handle it. So, from NASA, Save Uganda movement, we had Maru in there, quietly under this, and then UNLA. So, that's how they took over.
My own government was undermined by those people who didn't like to work together, by those people who wanted power for power's sake.
Meanwhile, 3 men were chosen to act as ceremonial presidents of Uganda.
we sat in the Nile Mansion again, tried to see how we could reduce the power of the presidency. Okay? Because Binaisa had replaced Rure. Rure had hoped he was big, he was important. So was Binaisa now doing a wrong thing, interfering with the balance of forces. And now we have the military commission, which we didn't know who it was. You know? So let's get presidents, but let's have 3 wise men. Yeah. So we came up with the Troika, Nyamchonjo, Wachor War, and Msoke. Yeah. And sure enough, Muanga ignored them. During that, nobody seemed to know who these people were.
When Binaisa was removed, he was put under house arrest at State House Entebbe under the protection of Major General Musuguri, who was the commander of Tanzanian troops in Uganda until after the election of 1980, when he requested to meet President Julius Nyerere. When he was taken to Tanzania, he opted to seek asylum in the United States.
8 long months being detained as a head of state. I mean, it was a real shame on the government and of an independent African state, because you see, they had to keep their prestige, but they didn't keep it in this case because I was detained.
Now, with Binaisa out and the military commission with Muanga at its helm, the stage was now set for the election, which had initially been scheduled for the 30th September 1980. It was clear that they were to be held under multi-party arrangements as opposed to the earlier proposed Binaisa's umbrella. And clearly, Milton Obote's presence as UPC's flag bearer was inevitable. On 28 May 1980, Milton Obote returned from his 9-year exile in Tanzania. Nyerere provided a Tanzanian military plane to transport him and his entourage. He landed at Nyacharara airstrip in Mbarara. His arrival was emotional and impressively orchestrated. With tears in his eyes, the former president kissed the soil as he stepped down from a Tanzanian military plane and swore never to go back into exile again. Obote's choice of Bushenyi as his landing pad, as opposed to landing at Entebbe International Airport, was a UPC strategic initiative. However, some party supporters held dissenting views to this strategy.
There was a feeling that that area might have shifted, and also to show that he was more the central region was, of course, a bit difficult for him. And the best thing, if he went to his own place in the north, it wouldn't have worked, or in the east. So they opted for a neutral place, or a place which would be neutral to everybody, and they decided to go to the west.
I said to Obote, I've heard that we are going to Bushenyi. Why don't you come to Kampala? And he said, what is wrong with Bushenyi? I said, no, there's nothing wrong going to Bushenyi. It's part of Uganda. But why don't you come to the national capital where all the people will come and welcome you, instead of making it a regional or even a tribal group to welcome you?
As a person I disagreed with was to land in Mbarara and then proceed to Bushenyi and all those things. I thought the best thing would be to land in Entebbe and proceed to those places. But somehow my colleagues who were in the planning part, Edward Rangaranga, Professor Tiberondwa, Rwakasisi, were more, they swung the thing to the western region, to Mbarara and to Bushenyi.
Well, Obote came back as a wounded buffalo, determined to crush all those who he believed had supported Amin in his early days of his rule, and he was not prepared to offer any real reconciliation or compromise. The opening up for multi-party activities came with the revival of the old political parties, UPC, DP and CP, but most importantly, the birth of UPM. Yona Kanyomozi was one of UPC's big wigs that spearheaded the revitalization of UPC.
He started off wanting to recover and retake our position again of running the country politically and setting programs of economic recovery after 8 years of Amin. So we had a program, we sat down, drew up a manifesto on which we thought we would run the 5 years of UPC government. Now a bit modified. The radical part of the old days of move to the left was modified a bit to accommodate different trends in the world at that time.
Francis Wenje was elected Secretary General of DP and tasked to revive the party.
It was a generation of young people. At that time I was about 35, 30-something. And those who were ahead of us, like Semogere, I think he was about 40, in his early 40s. But it's the generation which had suffered under the first regime of Obote, which had seen their parents suffering, and then also which suffered under the Amin regime. So we had the anger, we had the brains, and we wanted to make a change, to cause a change. We are heavily supported and organized, and one thing that is very pleasant, we got a lot of the former UPCs into the party. The Kahigirizas, the Mpambaras, the Brigadier Shabano Protein, all those people. And in Uganda it was almost 99%. So we had the ability to organize, and we wanted to remove the suffering of our generation, because our generation had suffered, and so that is how we managed to make the DP a vibrant party.
Jabel Bidandisali, together with other defectors from the old parties, formed and kick-started UPM.
Those of us who did not believe in going back to parties met. In fact, I remember we met at the State Hall, trying to find out what next. And that is when we decided to form the Uganda Patriotic Movement.
Well, as you can see, the race for State House and Parliament was set. Paul Kawanga Semogere for DP, Meriton Obote for UPC, Mayanja Nkanji for CP, and Yoweri Museveni for UPM. It is worth noting that unlike other candidates, Obote did not stand for election in any constituency because the constitution then provided that a party with the majority members of parliament would provide a president. Therefore, his choice to ignore parliamentary constituency bid confirms his conviction and determination to reclaim his position as president of Uganda. In the next episode, we shall focus on 1980 elections voter registration, campaigns, the polling exercise, the election results, and the contestation of the results with its consequences. Thanks for watching, and see you then.
Le le le